The cardboard box was heavier than I remembered. Or maybe I was just tired. 3 years of my life fit into one box, and my brother still could not even look me in the eye when he handed it to me on the porch. He just said Mom would have wanted you to have your things, then started backing toward the front door, the same door that had once been mine too. I did not argue. I was too exhausted for that. I loaded the box into my truck and drove 40 minutes down Route 9 to the property my mother had left me, a worn-down flower shop on the edge of Millhaven, Pennsylvania. The paint on the window trim was peeling. The sign had lost 2 letters, and nobody had bothered to replace them. The parking lot had more weeds than gravel. My brother got the house I had moved back into at 27 to care for our mother for 3 years while he built his career in Phoenix. I got a flower shop that had not turned a profit since before I graduated high school. I sat in my truck for a long time. The engine ticked as it cooled. A plastic bag drifted across the lot and caught on the fence. I was 31 years old. I had spent 3 years changing medication schedules, sitting through doctor appointments, learning the difference between a pulmonologist and a cardiologist, sleeping with one ear open every night, in case my mother called out. I had put my own life on hold. A job offer in Pittsburgh, a relationship that could not survive the distance I refused to travel. All of it folded up and set aside. Then she died. Quietly. On a Tuesday morning in March, my brother flew in for the funeral, shook hands with relatives, cried in a way that looked practiced, and 3 days later sat across from me in the attorney's office with an expression that already felt decided. He got the house, the furniture, the savings account. I got the flower shop. She always said you had a green thumb, he told me afterward in the parking lot. Like that explained anything. Like that was supposed to soften the blow. Then he smiled, actually smiled, and said, I always figured you'd end up doing something like this anyway. Small town, small life. I said nothing. I got in my car. I drove. And now I was sitting in a cracked parking lot, staring at a building that smelled like old soil and something vaguely sweet and rotting, and thinking this is what 3 years of my life bought me. I almost left. I want that said clearly. I almost put the truck in reverse and drove away, drove straight to Pittsburgh, started over somewhere anonymous. Somewhere nobody knew me as the daughter who stayed, the daughter who gave up everything, the daughter who apparently got exactly what she deserved. But it was getting dark, and I had nowhere else to go that night. So I got out. The front door stuck. I had to lean into it with my shoulder, which felt appropriate. Inside, the air was thick and stale. Someone had left a half-empty bag of perlite open on the counter, and it had gone damp and clumped together. The refrigerated display case along the far wall had been turned off. I could tell from the silence. And underneath that silence was the faint smell of something that had once been flowers and was now just organic matter returning to the earth. I found the light switch. One of the 2 overhead fluorescents flickered on. The other one stayed dead. I stood there in the middle of the shop and looked around at what my mother had left me. Dried flowers hung from hooks near the ceiling. Lavender mostly. Some eucalyptus. Some status in pale purple and white. They had been there long enough to gather dust, but they still held their shape. There was a wooden work table scarred with years of cuts and soil stains. Shelves of ceramic pots lined the wall, some cracked, some intact, arranged with the kind of care that stays visible long after the person who gave it is gone. Behind the register, pinned to the wall in my mother's handwriting, was a small card. The right hands will know what to do. I stared at it for a long time. She had written that. She had pinned it there in her own shop, with her own hands, and left this place to me. I did not know what to do with that yet. I was still too raw, still too close to the funeral, the attorney's office, my brother's smile. So I pushed it aside. In the back storage room, I found a folding cot my mother had apparently used during the holiday rush when she worked late. I unfolded it, lay down in my coat, stared at the water-stained ceiling tiles, and fell asleep to the smell of dried lavender and old soil. I woke at 5:30 because the refrigerated case clicked on automatically. For a second, I had no idea where I was. Then I remembered, and all the weight came back at once. I forced myself up, forced myself to move. In the back room, there was a utility sink. I washed my face with cold water and dried it with a paper towel from a roll on the shelf. I found a coffee maker on a side table, filled it, and stood there waiting while I looked around the room properly for the first time. It was smaller than the front of the shop, divided by metal shelving into a work area and a storage area. There were bags of potting mix, boxes of floral wire, rolls of ribbon in a dozen colors, boxes of cellophane wrap, labeled bins along one wall, sympathy arrangements, wedding materials, seasonal, everything organized, everything deliberate. My mother had been a systematic woman, Everything had a place, which is why the corner bothered me. In the far left corner of the storage room, behind a shelving unit that looked like it had been moved recently, there were drag marks in the dust on the floor, and behind it, a door I had not noticed the night before. It was low and narrow, painted the same beige as the wall around it. No handle, just a small brass latch, the old kind that folds flat. I stood there with my coffee in my hand and wondered whether I really wanted to know what was behind it. Then I opened it. It was not a closet. It was a staircase. 6 narrow wooden steps led down into a basement that should not have existed. Years earlier, when my mother first mentioned the shop to me, I had looked up the property records out of idle curiosity. No basement was listed. No below-grade space. Just the footprint of the shop and the storage room. But there it was. 6 steps, and at the bottom of them, a room. I went down slowly, one hand against the rough stone wall. The light from the storage room only reached partway down, so I turned on my phone flashlight. The beams swept across the concrete floor, clean and empty at first, then moved higher across the walls, and I stopped dead. The room was full, not with junk, not with forgotten clutter, not with the kind of basement mess that grows when nobody is paying attention. This was organized, deliberate, planned. Metal shelves lined 3 walls. On them were records, binders, ledgers, file boxes labeled by year going back 30 years. In the corner sat a small fireproof safe with a combination lock on the front. In the center of the room was a folding table with a battery-powered lamp. I found the switch and it came on. And on that table sat a single manila envelope. My name was written on it in my mother's handwriting. I sat down right there on the cold concrete floor because suddenly my legs did not feel reliable. I looked at that envelope for a long time before I touched it. My name. Her handwriting. In a room that was not supposed to exist. Beneath a flower shop everybody had treated like a consolation prize. I picked it up. It was not sealed, just held shut with a bent metal clasp. I opened it carefully. Inside were 2 things. A handwritten letter, 7 pages long, and a business card for an attorney I had never heard of. The attorney on the card was not the same one who had handled the estate. This was someone else entirely. I read the letter there on the concrete floor, in the hidden room beneath the shop, with the battery-powered lamp throwing a hard circle of light across the table and the shelves and the years of records my mother had kept out of sight. I am not going to repeat every word she wrote. Some of it belonged only to her and to me. But what mattered, what changed everything, was this. She had started the business when I was 4 years old, not because she needed the money. My father's life insurance had covered the house. She started it because she needed something that belonged to her. Something she built with her own hands. She ran it for 27 years, through the slow seasons and the good ones, through my father's death, through my brother's adolescence, through my own growing up, through the years when flower shops began dying because people ordered online, and through the years when she adapted and found ways to survive anyway. She had built something real. And in that letter she told me she had watched both of her children grow into adults. Watched carefully. She said that plainly. She had watched carefully for a long time, and she knew what she knew. She knew my brother was not careless because life had been unfair to him. He was careless because he was selfish, because he had never been required to be anything else. She wrote that she had made things easy for him all his life because it had been easier than demanding more. And over time she had watched him become someone who expected things without earning them. She said she was sorry. Sorry she had done that. Sorry she had not required more from him when it mattered. Then I reached the part that made me stop reading. She wrote that she had watched me come home. She had watched me set down my own life piece by piece, without being asked, without complaint. And she said she had never once taken that for granted, even when it may have looked like she had. I had to stop there for a while, because grief does strange things. It hardens you in one place and hollows you out in another. I had spent weeks believing she had seen what I gave up and thought little of it, that she had accepted it the way people accept weather. Useful when present, forgotten when it passes. But that was not what she wrote, not even close. The shop, she said, was not the consolation prize. The shop was her life's work. She left it to me because she believed I understood something my brother did not, that anything worth having asks something of you, that building something real requires patience, attention, and the willingness to stay with it when it is no longer easy, no longer glamorous, no longer rewarded in obvious ways. Then the letter turned from confession to instruction. She wrote that the shop had value, not sentimental value, real value. She had spent the last several years quietly and systematically building what she called the other side of the business. The ledgers in that room documented everything. Wholesale contracts with 3 regional grocers, a long-term arrangement with a hotel chain, a licensing agreement for a proprietary dried floral arrangement line sold through a home goods retailer I absolutely recognized. She had told no one. She had built it in the margins, carefully, the way she did everything, then documented it, protected it, and placed it in a room no one knew existed. And then she told me exactly where to look, exactly what to read, exactly who to call. The attorney on the card, she explained, handled a separate trust, not the estate that had already been settled, a business trust created years earlier, structured to transfer to me upon her death and upon my taking possession of the property. My brother's name was nowhere on it. He had never known it existed. My mother had known exactly what she was doing. I sat on that cold floor for 2 hours. I read the letter twice more. I opened ledgers. I checked the figures. I turned pages with hands that did not feel quite steady. These were not vague promises or scraps of hopeful bookkeeping. These were real numbers, real contracts, documented revenue, renewal clauses, names, signatures, timelines, account histories, the kind of paper trail that means something when grief is over and life becomes practical again. And sitting there with all of it spread around me, I started thinking about my brother, about him standing in the attorney's parking lot after the estate meeting, smiling as he said, "Small town, small life." I thought about the 3 years I had spent waking up in the middle of the night to check on my mother, driving to pharmacies at midnight, sitting in hospital waiting rooms under fluorescent lights with old magazines in my lap. I thought about the Pittsburgh job I never took, the relationship I let slip away because I would not leave, the version of my life I had folded up and placed on a shelf because there was someone who needed me more, and I thought about my mother, alone in this room, building something quietly, protecting it, waiting for the day she could pass it to the person she believed would understand it. At 9 o'clock, I called the attorney. His name was Mr. Okafor. He answered like a man who had been expecting this call for a long time. Matter of fact, professional, not surprised in the slightest. He told me my mother had been clear in her instructions and meticulous in her documentation. He told me the trust transfer was straightforward. He said we should schedule a meeting as soon as I was ready. I told him I was ready now. I drove to his office with the letter and the business card beside me, and sat across from him at a clean desk while he explained, piece by piece, what my mother had built. The wholesale contracts alone, he said, generated enough annual revenue that the shop would not need to turn a profit from retail sales for years if I chose to keep operating it. The retail side, the visible side, was actually the smaller part of the business. The licensing agreement still had 4 years left on its initial term, with renewal options. The hotel chain contract had just been renewed. Then he slid one document across the desk. I looked at the number at the bottom, and I looked at it for a long time. It was not a small number. There are moments when the world does not explode or collapse or shift in some dramatic, visible way. It just quietly reveals that everything you believed about your life 48 hours earlier was wrong. That was one of those moments. My mother had not left me a burden disguised as an inheritance. She had left me something extraordinary. Something she had built slowly, carefully, intelligently, then wrapped in the plainest possible package and hidden in plain sight. When I left Mr. Okafor's office, I drove back to the flower shop and parked in the same cracked lot where I had sat 2 nights earlier believing I had been given nothing. I looked at the peeling paint on the trim, the missing letters on the sign, the weeds pushing through the gravel, and then I understood. She had done this on purpose. She had kept it looking unimpressive because she knew exactly who would look at it and what they would see. My brother would see a tired little store at the edge of a small town, a disappointing property, a sentimental leftover. He would take one look and dismiss it. And that was the point. That evening he called me. He sounded cheerful, light, already talking like a man arranging his future. He had spoken to a realtor about the house. He was already thinking about what to do with the savings. Then he asked how I was settling in with the shop in exactly the tone someone uses when asking how another person is coping with a disappointment they are too polite to name. It's a lot to take in, I told him. That was true. I'm sure you'll figure it out, he said. You always land on your feet, even if it takes a while. I did not tell him. Not that night. I let him keep his version of the story. Let him believe he had walked away with the meaningful inheritance while I stood in the ruins of something quaint and failing. I hung up, went back inside the shop, and stood for a long time beneath the dried lavender and the dead fluorescent bulb and the little handwritten card still pinned behind the register. The right hands will know what to do. For the first time since the funeral, I thought maybe she had known exactly what would happen. Maybe she had seen further than any of us. Maybe she had built the answer years before the question ever arrived. And maybe, just maybe, she had been right about whose hands these were. I spent the next 2 weeks in that hidden basement room going through every binder, every ledger, every file box my mother had left behind. I learned her business the way you learn a language from someone who is no longer there to teach it to you directly. From context, from structure, from the evidence of choices repeated over years. Slowly, then all at once, the shape of it became clear. I called the grocery contacts first, then the hotel chain account manager. In every conversation, I introduced myself the same way. I am the new owner. I am her daughter. And every single time I heard it, that subtle change in the voice on the other end, recognition, warmth. A note of confidence that hit me harder than I expected. They had heard about me. My mother had told them. Quietly, carefully, in the same deliberate way she had done everything else, she had made sure the people who mattered knew her daughter would be taking over one day. She had made sure they understood I was someone they could trust to follow through. That realization stayed with me. Not just because it was practical, though it was. Not just because it made the transition easier, though it did. It stayed with me because it meant that while I had been upstairs, changing medication schedules, and keeping doctor appointments, and sleeping with one ear open, my mother had been downstairs building a future and placing my name inside it. By late April, I started changing the visible parts of the shop. On a Saturday, I repainted the window trim. I fixed the sign with the missing letters. I turned the refrigerated case back on for good, ordered new stock, cleaned the windows, and on a Monday morning, opened the front door to air that smelled like fresh eucalyptus instead of slow decay. The light coming through the glass felt different then. Not because the building had changed that much, but because I had. What had looked like defeat now looked like cover. What had looked like something abandoned now looked like something protected. My brother came through town in May, or at least that is what he said. He stopped at the shop and walked in wearing the same expression he had worn in the attorney's parking lot, that faint look of pity people use when they think life has quietly gone wrong for you and you just have not admitted it yet. He looked around at the flowers, the ceramic pots, the dried lavender still hanging from the ceiling, and asked how business was. Then he asked if I was covering my costs. I told him I was doing fine. He glanced around again and said, "Mom really did just love this little place, didn't she?" In that tone people reserve for things they consider harmless and small and fundamentally unimportant. I told him she built something real here. He smiled at that, the same smile, the one he used when he thought I was being sentimental instead of factual. Then he made me an offer disguised as advice. "If you ever want to sell the property," he said, "I might know someone who'd be interested. Get you some real money out of it, a fresh start." I looked at him then, really looked at him, and I thought about the letter, about the way my mother had written about him. Not with cruelty, not with bitterness, with honesty. She had loved him. That was clear in every line, but she had also understood, finally, that love without expectation had done damage. She wrote that she regretted the ways she had failed him. And she wrote something else too, something that stayed with me. She hoped the grace of getting less than he expected might teach him what she never had. "I am not selling," I told him. He nodded like he understood, though he clearly did not. "Sentimental value," he said. "Not sentimental," I said. "It's a good business. I'm going to grow it." He laughed a little. Not openly cruel, just dismissive in that soft, polished way some people have, the way they make you feel naive, without ever saying the word out loud. I did not explain. I did not show him the ledgers. I did not mention the trust. I did not tell him about the document Mr. Okafor had slid across the desk, or the number at the bottom that I had stared at until the room seemed to tilt. My mother had not required me to tell him. She had left me the choice. He stayed maybe 20 minutes. Then he left, and I stood in the doorway of the shop watching his rental car pull out onto Route 9 and disappear into the late spring light. I stood there a while longer after the sound of the engine was gone. Then I looked back inside, at the work table, scarred, solid, waiting, at the flowers, at the shelves, at the cards still pinned behind the register in my mother's handwriting. "The right hands will know what to do." I had wondered at first whether she wrote that for me or for herself. Standing there that day, I realized it might have been both. I went back in because I had work to finish. A standing order for the hotel chain. 40 centerpieces in white and pale green, due Thursday. The kind of order that once would have sounded impossible to me, back when I still believed this was only a failing little retail shop with peeling paint and a damaged sign. But now I knew what it was. I knew what she had built beneath the visible surface, and I knew why she had trusted me with it. I found the old playlist on my mother's phone, the one labeled shop, set the phone in its dock on the shelf, and let the music fill the room while I worked. My hands moved almost before my mind caught up. Cutting stems, sorting texture, setting balance, building shape and rhythm and color the way I had done 100 times beside her without ever thinking that I was learning anything permanent. But I had been learning. My hands knew what to do. They had always known. I had only needed to find the room where everything was kept. Go down the stairs, turn on the light, see what had been waiting there all along. That is the thing about some inheritances. They do not arrive looking like treasure. They arrive looking tired, overlooked, almost insulting. They arrive wrapped in dust and peeling paint and other people's bad assumptions. And only later, if you stay long enough to look properly, do you understand what was really passed into your care. Some things are not built to be seen from the outside. Some things are built from the inside out, slowly, over years, by someone who knows exactly which pair of hands they are building them for. My mother knew. She left instructions in the handwriting I had known all my life, left them in a room no map acknowledged, beneath a flower shop everyone else had mistaken for a consolation prize. And by the time I understood that, I also understood something else. She had not only left me a business, she had left me proof that she had seen me, proof that what I gave had not disappeared into the air uncounted, proof that staying had meant something to the person who mattered most. That evening I worked until 7. 40 centerpieces done and wrapped, stacked carefully by the door. I washed my hands in the utility sink, dried them on a clean towel, turned off the lights, both of them working now with the second bulb replaced, and locked the front door behind me. Out in the parking lot, the weeds were starting to come back through the gravel again. I made a note to pull them over the weekend. Then I drove the 2 miles to the small apartment I had rented nearby. Nothing fancy, nothing much, just enough. The windows down, spring air moving through the car, and for the first time in a long while, I was not thinking about what I had lost. I was thinking about what I was going to build. I think my mother would have wanted to know that. I think she already did. If you have ever been underestimated, if you have ever been handed something the world called small while someone else walked away certain they got the better deal, remember this. Not everything valuable announces itself. Not everything powerful looks impressive at first glance. Sometimes the real inheritance is hidden under dust and silence, waiting for the person with enough patience, enough loyalty, and enough strength to open the right door and walk down the stairs. And when that moment comes, do not look back. Take the light. Take the room. Take what was meant for your hands.